Hello, and welcome to the Barcast. I'm your host, Nick Barr, coming to you on a rainy, cloudy fall Monday morning here in New York. We're continuing on with the nine, and today we'll talk about the sexual nine, whose keyword is symbiosis. And let's get right into it. Naranjo begins. I would prefer to use the word union, the word that Ichazo used, in a more elevated sense. Union signifies the response that we find in love, the desire for communion with the beloved. Thus, such a word should not be used to describe the neurotic game. Therefore, I prefer to use words like fusion, confluence, symbiosis. Yeah, and I'll just jump in quickly. I think union, that's a good discernment there from Naranjo, because union, in a way, is the divine memory of the nine. Union is the thing that the nine is trying to get back to. That's their paradise keyword. So symbiosis is the neurotic game that the nine plays to try to recover union. The sexual nine experiences the need to be through the other, the need to be through union with another, through fusion with another person. They use the relationship to feed their being because they cannot find footing on their own. A true union would require both people to stand on their own 2 feet before coming together. But in this case, there's a kind of substitution. Because these people lack their own place, their own being, they wish to exist in the world through the other. This makes them very affectionate people, but it's a suspicious kind of affection, like one of the many surrogate forms of love that appear in the repertoire of the ego. What stands out in sexual nines is that they belong to no one. These are people who do not fully live out their passion, in the best sense of that word, i.e. not the passion as in the Enneagram passion or sin or addiction or what have you, but the passion is in the calling, the vocation. They're precisely too dispassionate. When the Beatles wrote the song Nowhere Man, they may have been referring to someone of this character. In Spain, there's the term mosquita muerta, little fly, little dead fly. Nobody would notice this person as they blend into the wallpaper pattern. In English, there's a saying for people who are like flowers on the wall, wallflowers. Can fix that. Translation. Wallflowers. They are lost in the background. Elias Canetti wrote a book on characters called Ear Witness, in which he describes someone who is clearly a sexual nine. El legado, it's not the legacy, it's like the legate. The legate never asks for a certificate. The legate never asks for a certificate, nor would he ever obtain one, as he never goes anywhere on his own business, and thus has no need for one. It's true that he eats, but he does so modestly and without causing any trouble. No one has seen him with his mouth open. He prudently takes his food in a corner, silently. He discreetly touches his teeth. He has a few left. This is a very cruel characterization. The person betrays his own needs, is so focused on satisfying the needs of others that he has few teeth left. Quote, people take many photos on trips, and sometimes when he hasn't had time to step aside, he appears in the photograph without having been invited. The family of the host looks at the picture and grimaces. But even in those cases, he can be trusted. He himself takes the roles to be developed, and when he returns with the photos, he has disappeared from them. How he does it is a mystery. They don't ask, and he explains nothing. What matters is that the family remains as a family, and the legate is nowhere to be found in the pictures. End quote. All of this is a result of the need for fusion. You can fuse with another person, with a group, or even with your own body, but at the cost of life, at the most subtle level of life. So that's Naranjo's introduction. My dad is a nine, and probably a sexual nine, given the description, and I recognize that quality of him in the photographs, and so it's interesting because the sexual subtype, typically when we find the sexual 6, for example, the sexual 4, the sexual 1, there's a kind of intensity to the sexual subtype. And based on this introduction, we'll learn more in the essay by Juanita Richter. The sexual nine doesn't have that intensity show up in the same way. They're more intensely fused. And so precisely because of the intensity of that fusion, it's commensurate with the extent to which they disappear. So this is the nowhere man or the nowhere woman, the disappearing person, the person who disappears themselves from their photographs. And when they do appear, it's almost a mistake to be apologized for. So a really interesting character structure. Let's learn more from Juanita Richter. She writes, acknowledgments to Wilma Henning for receiving me in her home in La Serena, Chile, to Monica Ventura for helping her write her biography. And this is quite long. It's lovely, but I'm going to breeze through it because I don't think we need to go into the full depths. But this is one of the chapters that's truly kind of a spiritual autobiography. So let's see what parts we want to pull out for this commentary. My life before beginning the process of self-knowledge. When I was born, my mother spent the first 3 weeks with me, and then my father, and she went to the coast to pick up my Aunt Helga, who was arriving by boat from Hamburg to take care of me. My aunt had just studied neonatal care, and I was her first case. She became my second mother. I was made independent at 3 weeks old, which left a deep mark of emotional need. So, not that she was given up by her parents, but that they left her 3 weeks to pick up her aunt. Inside me, there's a painfully needy space. So this is what she attributes as, perhaps the initial wound or the initial trauma that births her character structure, is this separation at 3 weeks. Inside me, there's a painfully needy space, and what this space does is absorb all the energy inward to the point of disappearing. The feeling of belonging to the world vanishes, and it feels as though I live on Mars, not on Earth. The sounds of Earth reach me as if from far away. You are a wanted and loved child, my mother tells me. For me, it has been very difficult to come to understand this profound emotional void. At 2 years old, I was taken to live in the countryside, 2 hours from Bogota. The house was enormous, and I had 2 large rooms in the opposite side of my parents' bedroom. How alone I felt, I couldn't sleep there. They eventually moved closer to me. I would climb into their bed at night. And again, at 5, she moves to Bogota again to live with her aunt. With the birth of my brother, envy was born in me. So, gosh, it's so interesting. We've spoken throughout this chapter on the 9 about the connections between the 9, whose compass direction is north in the Enneagram circle, and the gap, the space between the 4 and 5, whose the compass pointing south. So there's this vertical line cutting through the Enneagram circle, and that line is a line of separation. And so in some ways, the wound is really similar here. Remember, envy is the passion of the 4. With the birth of my brother, envy was born in me. That would be more descriptive of the 4's passion than the 9. But the 9's character structure is to respond to that separation by trying to recover union. This is the child crawling back into the bed every night. The 4 instead latches on to separation. So she continues, I lived with my aunt for about 2 years. I became rebellious at my aunt's house. But her form of rebellion was like pretending to take a shower when she was actually just running the water, or not eating the buttered roll that she was sent with. She came to live with a new family, then another family. And so finally, she's studying at a German school. And finally, I arrived and felt on equal footing with everyone else, not as an outsider to a family that was very good. At that point in my life, there was a shift. I began to feel better in my own skin. I started to feel more pleasure, more joy. She has joyful memories riding back and forth. She could come home to her mother after school on the weekends. At home on weekends or in the afternoons after school, I would go horseback riding at a nearby farm. Aladdin was the name of this creature that carried me on his back to the mountain. This was my first, gosh, that's such a Colombia. It's a beautiful, like, I'm just imagining this girl on horseback climbing up the mountains on Aladdin in the mountains of Bogota. This was my first experience of freedom. I loved him and the forest. I always dreamed of being able to share these moments with a human man. That was my desire. And riding this animal, I had my first orgasms. Okay. This time is a light in my life. At last, my menstruation arrived. I was happy. I wanted to tell my mother, but didn't dare. Finally, I told her, and the expression on her face made me understand that I would find no support there. Alone again with myself, I went to the kitchen and spoke with the housekeeper, in my womanhood disconnected from my menstruation. Throughout my life as a woman, I forgot my menstruation. So there's sort of self-forgetting here. And the mother, I mean, she's obliquely describing her parents, but not present. I mean, her first separation is at 3 weeks, and in these childhood years, just not in contact, seemingly in a deep way with her mother. This is a girl who can't tell her mother about her own menstruation when she finally does. Confirms that this is in a place that she'll find support. So quite heartbreaking, while at the same time not. This is a theme that's come up with the 9 from the beginning. It's sort of like you squint at it and you're like, is this a nice childhood or is this a tough childhood? It's certainly a tough childhood, and yet there's neglect. Essentially, neglect is the crime being committed here, rather than active harm. It's a non-mothering mother. Month after month, it would catch me by surprise, her menstruation. It was also during this time that I lost contact with my roots with the people from school, with the Germans in Bogota. My connection was with the humble people of the countryside, with the housekeepers in my home. The boys I liked didn't see me. I now lived in loneliness and abandonment regarding my sexuality, my body, my emotions. I was drawn to marijuana smoking, but smoking it made me feel anxious and paranoid. I got involved with a completely inappropriate boyfriend for me, a much older, addicted man who would take me to seedy places in Chapinero for sex. Everything was very depressing, and I didn't know how to say that I didn't want it. Besides, I didn't enjoy any of it, but there was a force in me pushing me forward. Clashed with my mother. Fell in love with her pottery class teacher. Became pregnant, had Esteban. So she has a boy, Esteban, 2 years before she turns 18. And she lived with this man for 15 years. She continues, my search. Wow. A few days before my son's birth, my mother told me she had dreamed of a little native child. This dream showed her non-acceptance of the coming grandchild. She, with her Nazi German conditioning, had to have a dream like that. And these things made our relationship distant and not very loving. So she's alone with her son. That disconnection becoming very evident. And now it's her son feeling the loneliness and abandonment. She spent a lot of time, she says, with him, but it was a presence without being present, without real connection. Everything emotional was chaos and always overwhelmed me. I became jealous of Fernando. That's her partner. He tormented him. He tormented me. Sex was not very satisfying. I became an intense woman, abandoned, hysterical, and crazy, but I was glued to Fernando. A great clumsiness accompanied her everywhere. And so then her father dies. He's 88, and she accompanies him in dying. I was with him, she says, in his last moments of life. I knew I was receiving a great gift, but I didn't know what to do. I asked him to take a piece of me with him, and he passed away. A great silence entered the house. That day, my son came home counting crosses along the road. A few months after his death, I hit rock bottom. She saw a wise Indian man, Sanjay, who had come to Colombia. And at that point, with Sanjay's help, Esteban and she began the journey of reclaiming our lives. They start working with a man, Felix Cantoni, separates from Fernando, now starts having these appointments. I worked on my big identity problem, my complete lack of structure. I saw myself as jelly without bones. He set boundaries for me. I broke away from so many foreign beliefs. I was able to separate because I now had emotional support. I worked on my masculine and feminine aspects, Eros and Thanatos. A feeling of hope began to emerge in me. I cried a lot. It was very hard to see the state I was living in, to see my son's pain. She meets another man. At a party, we fell in love. I discovered erotic pleasure with him and lived it, but again, I created a relationship of dependency. This was because at the beginning of the relationship, he had another woman. When he left, it was as if a piece of my flesh had been torn away. It was only after a while that he separated from her. I felt that I couldn't live without Duni. I guess that's his name. Not seeing him was extremely painful. I lost myself again. And it was from that feeling that I abandoned my son. The other was stronger. I didn't have the internal resources to handle the situation. It was either him or my son. My identity as a mother was only just forming through therapy, and my need for affection was still very great. He didn't have the resources to accept me fully along with my son. And so again, abandonment is so present here. Esteban felt abandoned once again, reacted very strongly against Duni, and went off with his friends, getting into alcohol. In therapy, Cantoni told me, the day your son accepts the man in your life, that's the man for you. I'll never forget that phrase. Continuing, she has a horrible accident, 33 facial fractures. And I received a gift during those days. Despite having lost my face, which although it wasn't ugly, I'd never been able to accept as my own or as beautiful, I now accepted myself better. No longer felt repulsion toward my face, I accepted it. I loved it. I had to let my old face die to be able to accept myself with the new one. My relationship with Duni strengthened. For him, it was also a blow that opened him up. And 3 months later, it ended. It ended because he went to his farm in Ráquira with an old girlfriend for a few days, and I, vulnerable from the accent, couldn't take it and left him. Many surgeries, another accident. I almost died from anesthesia, and upon waking up, they showed me my heart on a screen through a catheterization. I saw it beating nonstop, carrying out its task without faltering, touchingly constant. I cried when I saw it and felt very, very fortunate to have such a wonderful gift. And then I decided to live, to enjoy, to arrive on Earth, to stop drifting away. Cantoni, this teacher of hers, stays by her side. I had to face my resistance to prosperity, my resistance to believing I was capable, my resistance to happiness. Here again, I think the shadow of the 9, maybe like the shadow of the 4, is to to come face to face with one's own strength, one's own ability, one's own capacity for independence, for prosperity, for happiness. And it was in those years, she says, that I began to feel a sense of belonging. Sometimes a feeling would arise that I was part of this city. I would walk down the street and all of a sudden feel that I was from here. So she starts working with a Gurdjieff group at Felix's suggestion. And this is sort of the birth of her spirituality. In the Bogota Gurdjieff group, they taught me to feel my body with acceptance and kindness. They taught me to bring the image of my mother down to my heart and to begin to accept her with gentleness, with affection. It was there that during the work with the sacred dances, the transpersonal opened up for brief moments. The difficulties that life puts in our way, they called, quote, the little dirt we work with. For me, waking up in the morning was accompanied by a feeling of depression and a sense that the ceiling was going to fall on my head. One morning, that feeling appeared again. I sat on my bed and began to meditate as I'd learned in the group. I could hear the voices that had been recorded in my memory since childhood saying, quote, Janny, you're good for nothing, or Janny, I'm going to pull you out of school, and so on. I listened to each one and told them I would no longer hear these messages. My depression and the feeling of the ceiling collapsing over my head went away, never to return. That was one of the most significant events in my life. At that moment, I saw that I was truly being helped, both by myself and by others. And those others are here, and also on a more subtle spiritual level. She begins a relationship with Alberto, a married man. And it was in this relationship that, quote, I saw how I related to others disappearing myself. This was how I related. My boundaries dissolved and I lost myself in pleasing others. That's why it was significant for me that after 4 years of being lovers, one day I opened the door and told Alberto to leave. And this happened without him seeing it coming, as if out of nowhere, because I had been holding it inside without saying much. Suddenly a demolishing "get out" erupted. And I realized that I didn't have to feel guilty. On the contrary, I was doing what I felt, defending myself from being unhappy. That relationship was good for a time, but no longer. He was not someone with whom I could build a real relationship. Now I go to bed with a deep sense of peace and joy. I'm finally supporting myself. So that's a classic sort of developmental journey for the 9 is to bring in the 8's no saying lion energy. This demolishing "get out" erupted. You could describe that as her extending her wing toward the 8. It's so much easier for the 9 to find the no. This is what I don't want, and to discover their yes from that. As a true 9, I'm not organized. I get easily distracted. I put off essential tasks. I don't believe in myself or my work. When a client shows interest, I practically feel like giving away my only piece hanging solo on some wall. She's an artist. And I even feel like thanking them for being interested in something of mine. My work doesn't seem to have any value. My financial situation is difficult because of this attitude. When I do make money, because whenever I have work, I sell it and earn something, I can give it away without hesitation so others will like me, all while ignoring my own needs and those of my son. This is all kind of in the present tense, but I think she's describing the past here, because now she has payroll, she has employees. Today I work with 3 of those people who joined the studio back then, professional painters, designers, and ceramists, Pedro, Indira, and Pilar. Last week, Indira invited us to her house to celebrate her 15 years working at the studio. So she now has this studio. I have a good relationship now with money and abundance. I have a relationship of trust and worthiness. People enjoy my work, seek me out to buy my paintings. And I'm also generous with others for my own abundance, just like my father, who is very generous. Thank you, Dad. for knowing what you were doing when you took me out of school and taught me the narrow path of independence. And thank you, Mom, for making me endure being so alone, because that solitude forced me to seek help. It's sort of the loving energy of the 9 there, very difficult childhood, but her choice is to bring her parents into her heart and see their positives and thank them for it. So I don't take that as a sarcastic thank you. This thank you for making me endure being so alone. There's hurt there, but if I'm contacting the true energy of the 9, I think there is real gratitude for that that lesson, however hard earned it was. She writes more about Jorge Llano and his school. This is like erotic cuddle puddle work, bodies, warmth. That moment is so liberating, so joyful. This is how Jorge welcomes me and shows me the path toward life. I spent 2 years attending Jorge's Wednesday sessions. I enroll in his therapeutic training program. She leaves the Gurdjieff group, joins Jorge's training. Fisher-Hoffman process, which I'm not familiar with that one. Should we do a quick detour? Interesting. Some kind of unpatterning work. I've definitely heard of it, but I don't know the details of it. So she completes that process. It helps me tremendously to see that my parents are who they are because of the lives they've had and never out of malice. Today, I'm here to care for my mother in her old age, whereas before, just thinking about it would drive me to drink. My partner, I always ask myself why I was so invisible to men, and I realize that I don't see them either. I'm the one who doesn't allow myself to have one for myself. I also see that I haven't really been alone because I had made a partner out of my son. So, yeah, so this is important. Let's finish this paragraph. I also see that I haven't really been alone because I had made a partner out of my son. And when I see this, I make an effort to free him and to find my own partner. I really set out to look for him clumsily, but with a genuine desire for companionship. First, I meet a strange character, kind of a wizard, a black man. The next day, I have a one-night erotic encounter with a young man. And a few days later, sitting in my living room, looking at the sliver of sky visible from there, I watch a cloud pass by. And inside me, something opens up, and I realize that love and companionship are for me too. That night, I go out to walk my dog around midnight, and from the bar on the corner, Maria Elena comes running, calling out, "Juanito, Juanita, Hildebrando invites you to his son's graduation on Saturday." I love the invitation. I'd been wanting to see Hildebrando for a while. Let's pause on Hildebrando for a second and talk about this big realization she has looking up at this cloud pass by. So symbiosis isn't merely an eradication of the self, it's an eradication of the selfness of the other. And so that's, I think, her insight. I'm so invisible to men because I realize I don't see them as whole selves either. So for the 9 who, and as we can see from her life history, kind of relentlessly seeks out the one to complete me, the one that I can fuse into and truly forget myself, then relationships and other people become seen also as I-it relationships, where the it is like kind of a home. This person is a refuge. This person is a home for me. This person is going to save me, fix me, shield me, protect me, give me meaning, give me purpose, energize me, whatever it is for the 9. And I think it could be all of the above. And so she's not seeing men for men. I'm the one, she says, who doesn't allow myself to have a partner. And simultaneously, she's partnerizing everybody. She's partnerizing her son, which is a brutal thing to do to your child as a parent. So it's this realization that allows her to meet Hilde. A week later, on a Friday, Hilde shows up at my house with a radio as a gift. He stays in my life. Our sexuality isn't perfect. This is where we both need work. Esteban and Hilde love each other. Hilde has helped me to let go of Esteban without abandoning him. It's been the same with my mother. He has shown me that you love your elders just as they are, period. No debate about it. And I've learned to love his children too. So she takes a very, I don't know, uncompromisingly positive take on her mother, which is like, that you take care of your elders. That's that, period. No debate about it, which is her path. And probably typical, she mentions being from Colombia. So that's certainly a cultural lesson there. But I don't think I'm as, and I don't think anyone would be as dogmatic. If she's being dogmatic about that, I think that's a mistake. But that's her path, that you've got to love your elders just as they are. She's choosing to care for her mother, who seems to have abandoned her at an early age. But that's not so surprising for a 9. And if the 9 can find a way to do that without abandoning themselves, then that's great. That is the gift of the 9. 9 is so gentle in spirit, so good-natured in spirit. That's not going to work for every character type. She mentions working with Claudio, feelings of jealousy, feelings of sexuality, feelings of bisexuality. So we're approaching the end here. This is, I think, powerful. What makes me a sexual 9? Primarily the abandonment, or the primary abandonment. My strategy for survival is to leave, to disconnect. My voracity, my merging. So when she says to leave, let's just check this translation. I don't think she literally means to leave, right? She doesn't show that history there. Let me just see if the translation provides anything else here. El irme, yeah, to. I would say maybe to exit. It's a tricky one. I think she means an emotional kind of exiting rather than a physical leaving. So my strategy for survival is to el irme, el desconectarme es mi estrategia primaria para. Yeah, my survival strategy is to exit, to disconnect. My veracity, my merging, my deflection, my insatiability, my oral fixation, my loss of contact with myself, because contact is too painful. Because what I find is an emptiness that is too vast. There's nothing there, no containment, only a large, boundless space. The place between Mars and Earth is too desolate, lonely, and cold. So this is where the 9, the 4, and the 5, I think, share that intimacy with emptiness. With voidness, which is a massive potential for capacity, as well as a sort of if I want to be poetic with it, I think that emptiness is the mother, is the inner mother for the 4, the 5, and the 9. So they have a very powerful, very distant mother of this void mother. And the possibility of healing there is really profound. But I think the reality is also just so much loneliness and abandonment and despair. But when one moves into that emptiness, the spiritual path, I think, opens up, quite quickly. I feel a lot of anger that I don't know how to express, so I bite, scratch, growl, and shout. I feel melancholy at 5 in the afternoon. I can't stand being scolded. I can't stand being denied something. I have no boundaries, and I don't know how to receive or set them. I don't know how to receive. I don't know how to give. I start to give so that others will like me, to be generous with others, while having nothing for myself or my loved ones. And I don't know how to receive or ask for what I need. I don't exist. I have no rights. I don't show up. I have no affection. I don't have empathy. I feel a lot of envy. I don't acknowledge my tenderness. I don't recognize my fragility or my vulnerability. I think I can handle everything. I carry everything. I am the tough one. So much overlap there with kind of the tenacious self-preservation 4. There's no time for me, and if there is, I get lost in it. I seek pain to feel alive. I hurt myself. I am masochistic. And if you hurt me, I will hurt you even more with my indifference. I instill fear. There is something very harsh about my lack of affection, my indifference, my insensitivity, my judgment, my non-acceptance of my body, my sexuality, myself, my feeling of being ugly, my dressing in ugly clothes. A homeopath, Dr. Levy, prescribed me this remedy, hyoscyamus. This medicine has the following description among other traits: wants to bite, curses, blasphemes, is cruel, inhuman, arrogant, indifferent, impatient, very irritable. Sometimes aggression turns inward with suicidal tendencies, complains and reproaches herself, rude, feelings of guilt, remorse, constant fear of everything, easily startled, has an aversion to answering questions, gossipy, secretive, laughs constantly or excessively, premenstrual hysteria, talks about religious topics, erotic, exuberant joy or anxiety, difficulty concentrating, confusion, great veneration and respect for those around her. And so she closes with inner work. Without inner work, there's no chance. And she's already described at length how much inner work she's done. Ultimately, to take from the world what I need, to recognize what I don't need, to create my own living space, to not abandon, to learn to give the other their space and time without the need to run away, to abandon. Work with her body has been essential. Group therapy. Love for her mother. I can hug her, and I can also ask her not to interfere in my affairs without hurting her. Love for my father. Love for my son. Love for myself, just as I am. And with the body I have, which has been changing since I entered menopause, I'm becoming more full-hipped. I have more arms and more breasts, and I am broader. Accepting all of this has been possible thanks to my partner, thanks to not being alone, thanks to having support. Thank you, Hilde, for loving me just as I am. And so that's a lovely account of the sexual 9. And so I want to just close by seeing if we can name precisely the pattern, the ego pattern here of symbiosis, of latching on to the other. Like, why doesn't it work? In a way, I think it doesn't work because the kind of union. So what the 9 is trying to recover is a union. And their wrong idea about how to recover union is by fusing onto another person. But in that fusion, there's a double abandonment. They abandon themselves as a whole self, and they abandon the other as an other self. And instead, it becomes a transactional relationship. And in that transaction, the relationship can't survive. So she mentions, she chooses the wrong partner. But even if she were to choose, quote unquote, the right partner or a capable partner, so long as she's looking to that partner to take on responsibility for her meaning and her vocation, there's a kind of burdening there that is going to precisely sabotage her goals and produce the thing that she wants least, which is abandonment again. Either she will literally be abandoned by the other, who will go off with another woman, as happens in her relationship history, or she'll realize that she's abandoning herself by being with someone who's not fully present. And why is the person not fully present? Because she's not creating the conditions for full presence to happen, because she's burdening the relationship with this need for symbiosis, this need for fusion. So this sort of raw codependency. And that's a powerful sort of character structure to break through, especially for the 9, who has that laziness mixed with procrastination, as she says throughout. But her breakthrough moment is really, actually, I think, owning her real wish for union with a real partner. So her journey moves through a true longing for real partnership and a knowing that such a partnership will never happen inside of the ego structure of the sexual 9. So look at it, at the end, she has a real partner, real relationship with her son, real relationship with her mother, real relationship with her partner. And all that comes about through freeing them from the responsibility of providing her with shelter in which meaning is given to her, purpose is given to her, and so on. So that's the sexual 9. And we will close out the 9 next time with the self-preservation 9, whose keyword is appetite. See you there.